Let me tell you something that's going to make you uncomfortable. Right now, in this exact moment, you might be investing your time, energy, and emotional resources into a woman who will never give you what you actually need. And the worst part? The signs were there from day one. You just didn't know what you were looking at. Most men waste months, sometimes years, trying to turn a woman into someone she's never going to become. They ignore the red flags. They make excuses. They convince themselves that things will change once she gets more comfortable or sees how much he cares. But here's the brutal reality that nobody wants to hear. When a woman shows you who she really is in the first few weeks, believe her. Because those early patterns, they don't improve, they don't evolve, they amplify. Understanding these signs early isn't about being negative or cynical. It's about protecting your time and your heart from someone who fundamentally cannot give you what you need. The patterns I'm about to show you appear in the first 30 days, sometimes in the first week, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. Let's dive in. Sign 1, the accountability vacuum. Here's the first sign that should make every alarm in your head start ringing. She never takes responsibility for anything that goes wrong. Ever. Notice how carefully I'm phrasing this. I'm not talking about occasional defensiveness. I'm not talking about someone who struggles to apologize sometimes. I'm talking about a complete inability to own her part in any conflict or mistake. Watch what happens when something goes wrong between you, when there's a misunderstanding, when plans fall through, when feelings get hurt. Does she examine her own behavior? Does she acknowledge her contribution to the problem? Or does everything somehow become your fault, your misunderstanding, your overreaction? Pay attention to the language she uses during disagreements. Does she ever say, "I was wrong," or "I shouldn't have done that"? Or does every sentence start with, "You made me," or "If you hadn't," or "I only did that because you"? This pattern reveals something fundamental about her character. It shows you that she views relationships as a battlefield where admitting fault equals losing. She's protecting her ego at the expense of actual connection and growth. And here's what makes this so dangerous. Without accountability, there can be no real resolution. Problems don't get solved. They just get buried under layers of blame and resentment until the relationship suffocates. The accountability vacuum creates a toxic dynamic where you end up apologizing for things you didn't do just to restore peace. You start walking on eggshells, carefully monitoring your words and actions, because you know that any conflict will somehow circle back to being your responsibility. You become the relationship's emotional janitor, constantly cleaning up messes that aren't entirely yours while she remains completely blameless in her own mind. But it goes even deeper than conflict resolution. Watch how she talks about her past relationships. Does every ex-boyfriend become a villain in her story? Was every previous partner crazy or controlling, or the problem? If she has zero accountability for how her past relationships ended, she'll have zero accountability in yours. The pattern doesn't change just because you're a better man. It amplifies because you care more. This lack of accountability also shows up in smaller, everyday moments. She's late, but traffic was terrible. She forgot important plans, but she's been so stressed. She snapped at you, but you should have known she had a hard day. Notice the pattern? There's always an external reason, always a justification, never a simple, "I messed up, and I'm sorry." Here's what this really means for your future together. You'll never have a true partner. You'll have someone who requires constant management and careful handling. Every issue that arises will require you to navigate her defensiveness before you can even address the actual problem. You'll spend more energy protecting her ego than building a real relationship. And the most heartbreaking part, you'll start questioning your own perception of reality. When someone consistently refuses to acknowledge their mistakes, you begin wondering if maybe you are too sensitive, too demanding, too critical. This is how the accountability vacuum, doesn't just damage the relationship, it damages your sense of self. Women who can't take responsibility are showing you something crucial. They value being right over being connected. They value their self-image over your feelings. They value winning the argument over solving the problem. And no amount of love, patience, or understanding from you will change that fundamental priority. But if you think the accountability vacuum is damaging, the second sign reveals an even more corrosive pattern. Sign 2, the effort imbalance. This second sign is subtle at first, which makes it particularly dangerous. You're always the one reaching out, always the one making plans, always the one checking in, asking questions, keeping the conversation alive. And she responds, she participates, but she never initiates. In the beginning, you might not notice this imbalance because you're excited, you're happy to lead, you enjoy pursuing. But here's what you need to understand. Effort reveals investment. When someone consistently puts in minimal effort while accepting maximum effort from you, they're showing you exactly how much they value the connection. And the answer is, not much. Pay attention to who sends the first text of the day, who makes plans for the weekend, who asks the deeper questions, who remembers the small details, who follows up on things discussed. If you stopped initiating, would the relationship simply fade into silence? That question tells you everything you need to know about her actual investment level. The effort imbalance creates a relationship structure where you're constantly giving while she's constantly receiving. You plan the dates, you drive to her side of town, you remember her preferences, you adjust your schedule, you make the compromises. And she shows up, she accepts, she benefits, but she doesn't reciprocate with equal energy. This pattern reveals a fundamental truth about how she views relationships. She sees them as something that happens to her, not something she actively builds. She's passive, reactive, waiting to see how much you'll do before she decides if you're worth her effort. And here's the devastating part. You'll never do enough to change this dynamic because the problem isn't that you haven't proven your worth. The problem is that she doesn't believe relationships require equal effort from both people. Watch how she responds when you pull back slightly. Not as a manipulation tactic, but genuinely because life gets busy. Does she step up? Does she reach out more? Or does she simply match your decreased energy and let the connection grow cold? Her response in those moments shows you whether she's actually invested or just comfortably receiving your attention. The effort imbalance also appears in emotional labor. You're the one asking how her day was. You're the one noticing when something's wrong. You're the one creating opportunities for deeper conversation. She answers your questions, but rarely asks her own. She shares when prompted, but doesn't naturally think to include you in her inner world. This one-sided emotional curiosity leaves you feeling like you're interviewing someone rather than connecting with a partner. Here's what makes this pattern particularly insidious. She's never technically doing anything wrong. She's not being mean. She's not rejecting you. She's just not matching your energy. And because she's not doing anything overtly harmful, you feel guilty for even noticing the imbalance. You tell yourself you're being demanding. You convince yourself that maybe she just shows love differently. But deep down, you know the truth. You can feel the weight of being the relationship's engine while she's just along for the ride. You're exhausted from carrying the emotional load. You're frustrated by the constant one-sidedness. And you're starting to resent her, even though you can't quite articulate why, because she hasn't done anything obviously wrong. This effort imbalance becomes your future. Every milestone will require your planning. Every conflict will require your emotional labor to resolve. Every phase of growth will require your energy to navigate. She'll participate when you create the opportunity, but she'll never be the one creating opportunities. You'll build a relationship where you're perpetually auditioning for her approval while she decides whether you've earned her effort that day. And here's the question that should terrify you. What happens when life gets genuinely hard? When real challenges arrive, that require both people to show up fully. She's already shown you she won't. She's already demonstrated that effort isn't something she offers freely. It's something you have to earn constantly, repeatedly, without ever actually securing it. But the effort imbalance, as exhausting as it is, pales in comparison to the third sign. Sign 3. The empathy deficit. This third sign is perhaps the most devastating because it strikes at the core of what makes a relationship feel safe. She cannot see situations from your perspective. She cannot hold space for your feelings when they differ from hers. She cannot extend genuine empathy when you're struggling. Everything filters through her emotional experience, and if she doesn't feel it, it doesn't matter. Notice what happens when you express a concern or vulnerability. Does she make space for your feelings? Does she try to understand your perspective? Or does she immediately center her own emotional experience? You say you're feeling disconnected, and she hears that you're attacking her. You express hurt, and she tells you why you shouldn't feel that way. You share stress from work, and she makes it about how your stress affects her. The empathy deficit means you can never truly be seen or understood in the relationship. Your emotional reality only matters when it aligns with hers. Your struggles only receive attention when they don't inconvenience her. Your needs only get met when they don't conflict with hers. This creates a relationship where you're constantly translating your feelings into terms she'll accept, rather than simply being able to express them honestly. Watch how she responds when you're going through something difficult. Does she ask questions to understand better? Does she sit with your discomfort without trying to fix it or dismiss it? Or does she minimize your experience because it doesn't match her perception? You're stressed about a work situation, and she says you're overthinking. You're hurt by something she said, and she insists you're too sensitive. You're worried about a family matter, and she changes the subject to her own problems. This inability to extend empathy reveals something crucial. She lacks the emotional depth required for true partnership. Relationships require the ability to step outside your own experience and genuinely care about someone else's inner world. Without that capacity, every interaction becomes transactional. Your feelings matter only in relation to how they affect her. The empathy deficit also appears in how she responds to your boundaries and needs. When you express something important to you, does she respect it, even if she doesn't fully understand it? Or does she need to agree with it before she'll honor it? If your need doesn't make sense to her, does she dismiss it as unreasonable? This shows you that her empathy is conditional. It only extends to experiences she can personally relate to or approve of. Here's where this pattern becomes truly destructive. You stop sharing your real feelings because you've learned they won't be received with care. You edit yourself constantly. You downplay your struggles. You pretend everything's fine, even when it's not. Because you've discovered that honesty leads to invalidation, and invalidation hurts more than silence. So you slowly disappear from your own relationship. The empathy deficit means you'll face every challenge alone. She might be physically present, but emotionally, you're isolated. When you need support, you'll get defensiveness. When you need understanding, you'll get dismissal. When you need genuine care, you'll get a lecture about why your feelings are wrong or inconvenient or unreasonable. This creates a relationship where you become her emotional support system, but she cannot be yours. You hold space for her feelings, validate her experiences, and adjust your behavior based on her needs. But the reciprocal care never comes. You're her therapist, her cheerleader, her emotional container. And when you need the same, she's unavailable or unwilling or utterly incapable of providing it. Women without empathy cannot build genuine intimacy because intimacy requires mutual vulnerability. And mutual vulnerability requires someone who can handle your full emotional reality with care. Without that, you're not building a partnership. You're performing emotional labor for someone who will never return the investment. But as damaging as the empathy deficit is, There's one final sign that predicts relationship failure with absolute certainty. Sign 4. The future resistance. This fourth sign is the ultimate deal breaker, and most men miss it completely because they're too focused on the present moment. She actively avoids or becomes uncomfortable with any conversation about the future. Not just the distant future. Any future that involves concrete plans, deeper commitment, or forward movement in the relationship. Pay very close attention to what happens when you naturally mention something weeks or months away. You casually reference a concert in 2 months, and she gets vague. You mention meeting each other's families, and she changes the subject. You talk about taking a trip together, and she says maybe without any follow-through. These aren't isolated incidents of being busy. This is a pattern of future resistance that reveals her true intentions. The future resistance shows up in her language. She uses qualifiers constantly. We'll see. Let's not plan too far ahead. I don't like to overthink things. Let's just see where this goes. These phrases sound reasonable on the surface. They sound relaxed and easygoing. But here's what they actually mean. She's keeping her options open. She's maintaining an exit strategy. She's refusing to invest in a future with you because she's not sure you're her final choice. This pattern reveals something essential about her commitment level. She's dating you in the present tense only. She's enjoying what you offer right now without any intention of building something lasting. And the reason she avoids future conversations isn't because she's cautious or taking things slow. It's because she knows that discussing the future would require her to either commit or be honest about her lack of commitment. So she does neither. She just keeps things perpetually vague. Watch what happens when you try to define the relationship or establish what you're building together. Does she engage in that conversation openly? Does she share her vision and hopes? Or does she make you feel pushy for wanting clarity? The future resistance often comes packaged with accusations that you're moving too fast or being too serious or pressuring her. But here's the reality. Wanting to understand where a relationship is headed after weeks or months isn't pressure. It's reasonable. And her resistance to that basic conversation tells you she doesn't see a real future with you. This shows up in how she integrates you into her life. You've been seeing each other for months, but you haven't met anyone important to her. She hasn't introduced you to close friends or family. She hasn't included you in significant parts of her world. She keeps you compartmentalized, separate, contained. Because integrating you fully would signal investment in a future together, and she's deliberately avoiding that signal. The future resistance also appears in how she talks about her own life plans. She mentions career moves, living situations, travel plans, major decisions, and somehow you're never part of that equation. She's planning her life as if you don't exist in it beyond this current moment. And when you notice that absence and mention it, she acts like you're being unreasonable for expecting to be considered in her future thinking. Here's what this pattern guarantees. You'll never have security or stability with her. You'll always be auditioning, always proving yourself, always wondering if this is going anywhere. She'll take everything you offer in the present without ever committing to a future. And the cruelest part, she'll keep you in this limbo just long enough that you'll feel too invested to walk away easily, but she'll never be invested enough to stay permanently. Women who resist future conversations are telling you they're not building with you. They're borrowing time from you. They're using the relationship to meet current needs without any intention of making it last. And the longer you stay, hoping she'll eventually come around, the more of your life you waste on someone who's already decided you're not her future.